Hi, everyone. Rochelle here, and Dr. Dana Philippine, welcoming everyone back to another episode of MindCare. Really, today's topic is about COVID-19, stuck at home due to COVID, what to do when trauma is at home. And today's topic, we're addressing domestic violence. And hopefully, for the next few weeks, we will be discussing COVID-19 and trauma. Now, this podcast aims to provide hope and answers and take away the stigmas of childhood traumas. Dr. Dana Philippine is a professional counselor whose focus is on childhood traumas. Hi, Dr. Dana Philippine.
Hello, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It's amazing. Isn't it wonderful to be in a new year?
Oh, it is. 2021.
Yeah,
and all that it, hope it's lots of joy.
Absolutely. Now, I know this is a topic that I'm sure our listeners are going to be really interested about because a lot of people have been talking about COVID-19 and domestic violence. All right, so when we get started, this is, I'm sure a lot of people are going to ask, okay, so let's get started here. What is domestic violence? Essentially, what constitutes domestic violence?
So domestic violence involves anyone that's in the home or violence that's seen impacting the various members of a home. But what we're talking about today is mainly intimate partner violence or spousal abuse or abuse that's taking place in the home between two individuals that's involving emotional, psychological harm, physical, sexual, verbal abuse, as well as neglect as well, and abandonment. So this is a problem that's actually global. It cuts through barriers of age, sex, culture, religious background, doesn't matter really, nationality, all of us are impacted in some way, some form, and families that are involved in this also is across the world.
Okay, so now today's podcast is about domestic violence and trauma at home. So let me ask you a question. How prevalent was domestic violence before COVID-19? Well,
it's actually one of the leading causes of trauma in the hospital when individuals come in to the hospital doing trauma searches or impacting them physically. Domestic violence is usually the number one reasons why that the individual is in the hospital for that. But it's a very underreported crime, and it's growing. It's a social problem within America and around the world as well. Every year, it's said that between 1.5 million females or 830,000 males are involved in domestic violence. And some report as high as 5.3 million women. So it depends on the reporting. And, of course, not everyone reports it, so that's one of those things. But around the world, it's 1 out of every 3 women are faced with domestic violence on a yearly basis. So it's impacting a whole lot of us, and some people might even know individuals who's going through those kinds of things. But some literature include that 85% of those involved in domestic violence, is impacting women. And then there was a study, this is interesting, a 6-year study between 2007 and 2012 that were looking at the database of various trauma centers, and they collected information of 16,575 patients. And what they found was interesting, not only that, of course, it's more female than male, but also when it comes to cultural, blacks and Hispanics were more likely to experience domestic violence over other types of trauma. And then when it comes to white patients, they experience less domestic violence but higher of other types of trauma. So that's an interesting fact for us to consider as well.
Okay, great. Now, we are talking about before COVID and after COVID. So now what are the number of reported cases of domestic violence, since the stay-at-home orders went into place a few months ago?
Okay, so something to consider, because this is one of those facts that people don't really aren't familiar with. But the surges of domestic violence usually go up when any calamities take place. So if you look at the databases and studies with natural disasters and floods and earthquakes and even an oil spill, for whatever reason, domestic violence seems to go up. That's one aspect. And another one, too, is that when families get together during times of Christmas and holidays, summer vacation, those times as well, it goes up. So anytime you leave families that are probably dysfunctional even from before, and they're put in a place where they're stuck at home, then typically those go up. So now with COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic that happened, a lot of times, of course we know that for public safety, social distancing, self-quarantine, and safer at home mandates are there in America and around the world. But a lot of people are faced with this notion that, is it safer for me to be at home, or is it safer for me to be outside and expose myself to the virus? And so that's what's happening right now. So in the first month of the stay-at-home order, for example, in 9 major metropolitan cities, it was reported between 20 and 30% increase in domestic violence calls. Wow. And in some areas as high as 62%. So it's gone really up. And there was a study that was done, a report that was done by the New York Times, looking at different things around the world when it comes to COVID-19. In Spain, the emergency number for domestic violence reported 18% more calls. In France, 30% more calls. In Britain, 20% more calls. So you see these numbers going up again as a result of COVID-19 or stay at home and so forth.
Yeah, and those are just the reported cases.
That's correct.
Not even the unreported. Wow. That's 62%. I mean, that's just blowing my mind there. That's just amazing. Okay, so that is an absolutely, that's a concern for everybody, definitely. So the next question would be, is why is it that families turn against each other in violence? Why is that? Yeah,
that's an important question, but one that we really don't have all the answers to, except that there are many reasons why people act violently. Perhaps their history, their upbringing, substance abuse, are involved. But, however, none of these are acceptable reasons for a person to hurt or hit another human being, of course. And something to keep in mind as well, that there is something that's obviously wrong with those individuals, and to keep this in mind as well, that thing that is wrong with them is not you. There is a well-known trauma expert from Harvard University Medical School. Her name is Judith Lewis Herman. She's been studying trauma, domestic violence in particular, for many years. And what she found, which was very interesting, she's been looking at the method that domestic violence people use to control their partners. She says that, and I quote, it bears an uncanny resemblance of individuals who kidnap during times of political uprising and for hostage situation. They mimic those methods of which one person takes control over another person to the point that they pull out their individuality out of them, meaning I am now in control of you. So it's very, very sad, but the whole idea is, the control and the power that they're looking for into getting from another person through isolation, through abuse of various sorts, or even using their children and using intimidation and so forth to undermine the other individual. But one thing that I always keep in mind is what it says in Ephesians 6, where it says, we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but against principalities and high places. In other words, a lot of times people are influenced by demonic thoughts. And when that happens, they do wicked things. And so we need to keep that in mind as well, that it has nothing to do with you per se. You're not the cause of anyone's, decision to be violent, except that they've made that choice to do wicked things, and they're allowing evil thoughts to make them do evil things.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, and I know this question has been asked by a lot of people, but we'd like your take on it. So why is it what are some reasons that people stay in abusive relationships?
I get asked that question so many times. One of the things that I would say is, if you look at 5 categories, I mean, there's a whole list of reasons, and this is just not, the whole list, of course, but I've identified them into 5 categories. One would be the isolation idea, that they feel unsupported by family and friends, and so sometimes the lack of resources that they feel that they don't have, like they don't have friends, they believe that they have no family to help them, they have no money for shelter or to places to go. So their lack of knowledge about resources and safety measures, and the fact that they've isolated themselves from their friends and families as well, contribute to that sense there's nowhere to go to. That's one. Second would be financial resources. So the knowledge of difficulties of possibly being a single parent, or, there's going to be a reduce in their financial situation, their lack of support from, for their families or their children, of course, and how they're going to be bringing money in, those kinds of things. The anxiety that comes about the financial aspect keeps them, with that mindset that I need to stay there. Another thought that I've heard many times is their false sense of hope. In other words, there's no way to go. I'm nobody without that individual. Their identity is kind of lost in that person. So they've made a lot of rational reasoning for that abusive relationship, or because they're stressed, or because they're the alcohol, because of work. So all of these reasonings, so this false sense of hope lies with that individual, kind of keep them in as well. Another area, I would say, fear. Fear of if they take an action, that violence might get worse, and sometimes it does, but the idea that, that person might attack me and they attack their children, they would lose a sense of their children, or they would lose custody of their children. So all these fears that keep mounting up in their mind keep them in. Another area I would say is belief system. So even their religious or cultural belief, their practices might make them believe that it's not supported, to separate, or not supported to get a divorce or so forth. So those belief systems keep them staying in there. Now, again, there might be other factors that keep individuals in, and it's very individual why a person decides to stay. But those are the 5 areas that seem to be more prevalent as to why people stay.
Wow, those are really powerful points, and I'm sure most of us, know people who are in domestic violence, or at least some of us definitely know people who are involved. And these are definitely some things that, I've heard of when I've spoken to friends. So thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Dana. So the next question is, and I'm sure for our listeners, if you are involved in domestic violence, this definitely applies to you. What can you do if you are in a domestic violence situation?
Okay, so if you are, let's first talk about if you know someone that's in a violent situation. That seems to be one that, a lot of people ask me more of, and then we'll talk about the other one as well.
Sure.
But if you know someone that's in a violent situation, listen to that person. Listen to them. Listen to them as much as you can. If they're calling, if you're talking to you, listen to them, because a lot of times they have no one to talk to. Secondly, I would say give them 3 key assurance. One is that they don't deserve it. 2 is that it's not their fault. And 3, that you believe them. They need to hear that constantly.
Okay, wait, hold on, Dr. Dana. I'm sorry, we got to stop for just a minute. I need you to go back over that and emphasize those 3 points. Listen to them. They don't deserve it. Keep going, please.
Yeah, they don't deserve it. It's not their fault. And you truly believe what they're telling you. So those 3 things they need to hear constantly. And then the third thing that they can do is tell the victim that you think that, and you know that they might be in danger. Let them know that this is a dangerous situation. That it may not be okay, that they're in a dangerous situation. They need to know that. Another area that you want to consider is to give them numbers of domestic violence resources. Because again, they sometimes feel that they have nowhere to go. There are numbers that you can give them around in their area. Another thing is to call and ask what you can do to help them. Don't tell them what you can do, but ask them what they can do what you can do for them. And then that kind of goes along with the next one too, is don't tell them what to do. Never tell a victim what to do. Because again, if they're in an abusive relationship, they're used to people telling them what to do constantly, and so you don't want to come across as that at all. And another thing to do is to ask them if they have a plan, what their plan, what can they do if they decide to leave, and what is the plan, so that maybe you can help them carry out that plan somehow. And then lastly, I would say is if abuse is actively happening, don't be afraid to call 911 on their behalf, and so call immediately. So that's one of those things I would say, keep in mind that you can help in that situation. But, of course, make sure that you yourself is in a safe position. So I wouldn't advise to constantly say, hey, come to my house, because you don't want to put yourself in danger as well. And so you want to get the right individuals, authorities involved to mitigate that situation.
Yeah, perfect. And I was going to stress again, now I have heard, now I don't know if this is true, maybe you can clarify, is it true that sometimes if you're too involved that you might be considered a threat?
Well, the thing I would definitely say is always safety first. So if you think that, you're in a position where you can put yourself in danger, you want to make sure that you're in a safe place or a safe situation as well. If you need to call people to get involved, be that voice to make sure that you're. So I don't know exactly, what the situations are, because every situation is different. They may not even need to know that you're involved, except that the individual, the victim, is the only one that needs to know that you're involved. I mean, I wouldn't call the house, where the abuser would be picking up the phone or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you're smart and wise about how you go about helping someone that's in a violent situation.
Okay, great. Now let's go back to this question. So what can you do if you are in a domestic violence situation?
So I guess the same thing, I would say the first thing is make sure that you are safe. So safety is very important over finances, over all those negative stereotypical behaviors or beliefs that people might have. Find ways to be safe. There's hotlines that people can call. There's a national domestic violence hotline, which is a very known hotline around the U.S., for example. It's 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-7233. So that's one thing for sure I would say. Make sure that you are in a safe position. Second, I would say pray and plan, not just pray alone and thinking, okay, everything is going to be fine, but pray and plan. So develop a well-thought-out plan, outline how it is that you're going to try to leave the situation. And please know that it's important to keep in mind that the most dangerous out of all the risks that I saw and potential lethal time for a victim is when they immediately trying to leave the relationship. So make sure it's a thought-out plan. Get people to help you plan it out as well. Another thing I would say is get help. For your children, for yourself. The trauma of living such a life, sometimes gets in your mind and you don't feel like you're capable of doing anything. So get help, get help, get help. Another thing I would say is as you're trying to, get well established after leaving a situation of domestic violence, get connected to your extended family. Don't be silent. It's okay to talk about the situation that you left. And at that point, you were a victim, but now you're an overcomer. Share your story so that you can help prevent domestic violence from happening again, especially since you've experienced it yourself. And then I would say make it a practice, a life practice to stay connected with at least one or two other people. Call them. Social media does not count. Make the practice of reaching out to others. On a weekly basis. Another thing I would say is establish yourself in a prayer partner situation, weekly prayer partner outside your home. Get a good friend, pray with them, pray for them. They'll pray for you, vice versa. That's important. And then another thing is know that you were never the cause of someone's anger. A lot of times people feel like, well, it's my fault, but it has nothing to do with you. Their anger is their choice. And I'm going to say that again. Their anger is their choice. So it has nothing to do with you. And lastly, it wasn't your fault, and so you didn't deserve that treatment. Again, as we mentioned, there was something wrong with that individual. And so they need to get help. And you are not the one to help them necessarily. A lot of times we feel that, we can help someone. We're so helpful. We can help them. We can help them out the situation. No, they need to go get help themselves. If you decide, should you decide to go back with that in their relationship, please do so wisely. Make sure they've gotten the help. Check with their therapist to see if it's okay to return if you need to do that, But make sure you fast away from that person. Give them time away from you and you trying to fix it, because you cannot fix anybody. And I'm going to say that again. You cannot fix anybody. They need to get the help themselves and get people involved, because the minute that you single yourself out, being alone in an abusive relationship, they're trying to gain that control and power over you. So you don't want to do that. You want to get people involved in your life outside of your home as well. So that's what I would say to those individuals as much as possible. And so we're going to be praying for you guys. If anything that we can do to help, again, the resources are out there. Reach out, call, get people involved, be safe.
That's right. And I appreciate, Dr. Dana, thank you for those points. And I know this podcast is about providing hope and answers. And so, Dr. Dana, I know there's a lot of information. I have one more question for you. There's a lot of information that you presented today. If there was one thing that you could tell our listeners to give them some hope, like maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel, what would that one thing be?
Some of the research that I saw was the fact that as high as, some 50-some-9% of people who've gone through these experiences, actually, only about 20 or so percent stay in it. And either they decide they made that choice to stay in it, but they don't have to be that individual to stay in that abusive relationship. So the hope that I would give them is that, God wants us to be wise. Pray and plan, and God will help you through the planning as well. So, you're not alone. So many people have gone through it or are even currently going through it. And be wise about every decision that you make. And safety is always, again, first.
Dr. Dana, as always, this was amazing information, insightful, helpful, especially in light of COVID-19. And so for our listeners, don't forget to visit the website, mindcare.us, for resources and any additional information. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
God bless. Bye.